Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to a special episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio with your host, Billy Willard of Sasquatch Watch of Virginia. What is this creature many know as Bigfoot or Sasquatch? It is a mystery that has went on for years. We talk to the men and women in the research. We talk to many who have had sightings of this creature. Will this mystery ever be solved? Are you ready? Let's get this show on the road. Here we go. Welcome to Sasquatch Watch Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. Good Lord, can you believe it? I'm behind the chair here again. It is August 23rd, 2012. Wow, it's been a long time. Anyway, just so that everyone knows tonight, we are changing the subject up a little bit. We're not here to talk about Bigfoot tonight, but we have a very special guest with us tonight. His name is Mr. Jim Covel. He is with the Monterey Bay, and he's going to be discussing some very interesting things with us tonight, particularly about sharks and other marine wildlife. So this is actually going to be a very interesting show, and to help me with the hosting, which she thinks she's going to help, but actually she's doing most of the work because, you know, she can handle it better than I can. So I've got with me tonight Miss Melissa Hovey. How you doing tonight, Melissa?
I'm doing good tonight. How you doing, Billy?
I'm doing just fine. So anyway, what I will do, just so that everyone knows tonight, we will not be taking phone calls. But however, if you want to call in to listen to the show, I know a lot of times it's easier to hear everything that's going on by calling in. We got plenty of lines for that, so anyone that wants to call in and listen to the show, you can call area code 347-237-5070. Again, it's 347-237-5070. That way you can listen to the show on the phone in case you don't have live internet connection and that kind of thing. We do have the chat room open. So if anyone has a question, a logical question that they want to ask about sharks or other marine life, we will see if we can get those questions in. So anyway, at this point, I'm handing the reins over to Melissa so that she can introduce our special guest tonight. You got the floor, Melissa.
Thanks, Billy. You put a lot of faith into me. It's been a long time since I've actually hosted, a program myself. But tonight, as Billy was talking about, we do have Mr. Jim Covel. He's the senior manager of guest experiences at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And this is always a very special treat for me because outside of my well-known hobby, my other passion has always been great white sharks. From the time I was very young until even most recently. So for me, it's personally an honor to be able to speak with Mr. Covel once a year, as we do every year after the Discovery Channel's series Shark Week, and we talk about the latest information that's out there. So let me bring you in. Good evening, Mr. Covel.
Good evening. Happy to join you tonight.
How you been?
Very good, very good. We've had another great year here at the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Yeah, and we were discussing that via email about it's been a pretty hot year for the Monterey area as a whole. Between the birds, quote unquote, situation, and now you've got the blue whales coming in on a regular basis.
It's been just every so often Monterey Bay, and it's always an amazing, especially summering area for wildlife. But every so often we get huge populations of krill, and it seems like the the whole food chain in the bay is really cranked up, and that's definitely the case this summer. We've had blue whales, maybe up to 40 or more blue whales hanging out here around this part of the coast and in Monterey Bay for a couple of months already, and probably well over 100 humpback whales out here as well. So it's been just amazing watching these huge animals hanging out and feeding daily out here in the bay.
Now, is this something that they've always done in the area, or is the food supply getting better? Is the bay more healthy? I mean, or are we just now hearing about it more often?
Well, and I think it's kind of a combination. There's a lot more people out on the bay keeping an eye out for these things, so we're probably paying a little bit more attention to what's going on in the bay. And also, we've seen whale populations here along the California coast really increasing steadily in recent years. Some of the healthiest whale populations on the planet are here along the Pacific coast now in California, Oregon, and Washington. So there are more whales to see also, and that coupled with the oceanographic conditions and the krill population here in the bay seem to be cyclical, and every so often there are just big years for krill. And the whales seem to be tapped into that. They figure it out pretty quickly and find this krill, and these whales are coming from down off Central America and coming all the way here to Monterey Bay to spend the summer feeding.
Just out of curiosity, I'm sure there's probably somebody in there sitting in the chat room right now, or they're going to hear this show. But I have a question for you. Now, the blue whale is what they call, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that called a baleen whale?
Yes, the blue whales are the largest of the baleen whales. If we look at whales overall, there's two broad groupings. Whales that are toothed whales. So if you think of killer whales and sperm whales, those are all whales that have a mouthful of teeth, and so they tend to feed on fishes and marine mammals and bigger things, giant squids and so on. And then a lot of the whales are baleen whales. They lack teeth. They just have those long sheets of baleen that looks kind of like a big broom hanging from the upper jaw of the whale, and they're feeding on tiny, tiny things out there in the ocean, taking in big mouthfuls of water and sifting out all of the animals in that water and swallowing all the tiny stuff. So the biggest animal on this planet, the blue whale, at maybe 85, 95 feet long, is surviving on little animals that are barely half an inch long.
Wow, it's amazing. That's truly amazing. So explain this to the listeners and to people that are going to hear this program. Okay, if these animals, the baleen whales, are just eating things as microscopic and small as just the krill, exactly what does this animal mean to the ecosystem of the ocean? Because it's not actually cleaning out the dead and, other animals that just float around in the water like, the killer whales might do, or, a great white shark or something. It's not a predatory type of animal. So exactly what does the blue whale mean to the ecosystem of the ocean?
Yeah, so they don't occupy that top predator niche. Right. They're really probably an easy way to look at it is in a land-based habitat, they might occupy that same kind of niche as grazers that are feeding very, very low on the food chain. And I always look at like elephants. Elephants are one of the biggest land mammals by far, and yet they really are just browsing on shrubs and bark and so on. They feed very, very low on the food chain, and so there's some advantages to doing that. There's a lot more possible kinds of food out there. Maybe your food supply is a little bit more stable, and it's actually easier to get bigger eating lots of little stuff than to try and hunt down prey. So it's kind of a pattern you see in nature that a lot of the biggest things eat pretty low on the food chain, eat some of the smallest things. Right. In terms of their role in the ocean, I can't say that blue whales are keeping krill populations under control, but they are, they're animals that have figured out a unique niche out there in the ocean, and they have figured out how to make a living and do so without competing with a lot of other animals out there. So they have kind of earned a special place out there in the ocean community.
Here recently I read an article, and I think we discussed this a little bit, about the U.S. Navy, or I think it was the Navy. They're talking about changing the shipping lanes, and they've actually put it into effect. They're changing the shipping lanes to help protect the whales during their migratory patterns up near the San Francisco Bay.
Yeah, and I think between the Coast Guard and I'm not sure which, there's probably several state and federal authorities that help determine the shipping lanes, because many areas off the central California coast are also incorporated into several national marine sanctuaries that have some say over shipping activity through those areas. But what we're finding is that we have throughout the winter the gray whales that move up and down the coast, they stay in very close into shore. And even these blue whales and humpback whales and other species, while they're feeding, they are often fairly close to shore also. And there have been a number of instances of large commercial ships colliding with whales, and the whale loses when it runs into a big ship like that. So they have moved the shipping lanes farther offshore, and that's no small feat, because it means that the commercial shipping traffic, you're burning more fuel to ship farther offshore, and so it's great that the commercial shipping traffic has been moved out there, and operators have been pretty cooperative with that move. And it makes life a little bit safer for whales moving up and down closer into the coast.
Right. Did the Monterey Bay Aquarium play a role in getting that, making that possible?
I don't think we had any direct role in that, other than in a lot of these conservation measures, I think the role the aquarium plays is just in helping the general public understand more about the incredible things living along our coast here, and how fragile they are in some ways, and how important it is for all of us to maybe do a little bit more in taking care of them. So by increasing awareness and building support for marine conservation actions in general, it makes it easier for other conservation organizations and even state and federal agencies to enact some of these conservation measures.
Now, I know there's some people that are going to be listening to this who are going to ask this question, or they're wondering. I had read about, was it 2 gray whales that swam up a river there in California, and they were basically under a bridge. And we had heard about how one had been tagged, but one had died. Do you guys have any idea whatever happened to that other whale that survived, or did it not survive? Do you know?
Yeah, and I'm not sure, and I believe that was, and there have been cases off and on. We get gray whales that swim up into San Francisco Bay from time to time, even up into the Sacramento River, and humpback whales. There's been some famous wandering humpback whales that have moved into streams. I think this most recent case was up in the Klamath River, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I know they did lose one of the grays. I'm not sure if the other one was heard from. I don't remember the outcome on that. And it was an odd case, because I think there were some moves to get the whales pointed back towards the ocean, and they kept turning around and heading upstream again into the river. And we don't know why whales do that. It's the same kind of thing when whales will strand themselves up on a beach, and you get them back out into the water and turned offshore, and they turn around and come back up and strand on the beach again. And if we didn't know better, it just seems like they're just bent on suicide, and so scientists don't quite know what to make of that. Animals, these whales may go into fresh water. Sometimes we think to rid themselves of parasites that can't survive time in fresh water. But sometimes they may just get disoriented, and they may have something seriously wrong with their otherwise very adept orientation system, that for some reason they think they're heading out to sea, and instead they're heading into shallow water We don't know really what causes that, but it's a very peculiar and very frustrating phenomenon when you're trying to save the lives of these animals, and despite your best efforts, you just can't get them headed back out in a safe direction.
Well, and this also brings up another conversation, too, about whales. And there's a lot of people right now who are they're adamant that, and I don't know if you can speak to this or not, or if any of your whale experts at the aquarium have done any work on this, but there's people who are adamant that the sonar systems of the submarines are causing these, the whales to beach themselves. I mean, have your scientists there at the aquarium ever had they looked into this? Do they have an opinion one way or the other? What do they think about this? Is it possible that this could be, causing whales to beach?
Well, and at the aquarium, our marine mammal experts here focus mostly on sea otters. So since we don't keep whales at the aquarium, we don't have a lot of whale expertise here on the staff. That has been a real popular topic of discussion, though, for several years. There have been a few cases where whale strandings have been pretty well linked to sonar. There are some new and different types of sonar being tested, particularly by the military, and in a couple of cases there's been some pretty good links between marine mammal strandings and testing. There's been a couple of court cases related to that. In most cases, though, the strandings, it's really hard to pin it down to anything. And the Navy in particular has really changed how and where they're doing the testing, and they monitor marine mammals in the area much more closely, so they're trying to address that. But it's been a real hot topic here for several years now.
Yeah. Hey, Melissa.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I've got a couple questions in the chat room that we can shoot out. This first question is actually from Bill Green. He's a loyal listener of the show. And his question, no, it's not about that.
Okay, all right.
His question, he wants to know, Jim, do you teach any of the Hollywood filmmakers how to make like a great white shark movie? Do you help them with any movies?
We have been involved in a few films. The one that comes to mind is Star Trek IV. That was actually filmed here at the aquarium.
Oh, awesome.
And the two humpback whales that were in that film, George and Gracie, were actually models that were built by a gentleman by the name of Peter Falkins, who's actually a pretty well-recognized authority on marine mammals. And other than just hosting the filming here, we didn't have much to do with that, but they consulted Peter Falkins extensively in trying to make those whales look and behave as realistically as possible for a couple of small models. And so in some cases, the filmmakers are trying to do a pretty accurate job in representing marine animals, and in some cases, they're not really trying to be that accurate about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even know that. Let's see. We had another question. Let me see if I can find it here. Okay. This comes from Gary Brown. Now, you may have already partially answered this, but I'll go ahead and ask his question. First of all, he mentions there's been an increase in whales getting close to the coast lately, and tourists are getting some pretty good videos. He says, why is this, and are they expected to stay that close in?
Yeah, there's been some amazing, in fact, just in yesterday's papers here in California and on the news here, and maybe these images have gone across country. Down in San Luis Obispo County, there's some amazing pictures of humpback whales lunge feeding within just a few feet of boats that were watching these animals, and pretty spectacular pictures of people in small boats with big whales coming out of the water right next to them. And earlier in the summer, we had similar images out here in Monterey Bay. And there's a couple things going on there. When these whales are lunge feeding, they're fairly predictable. They're working on maybe a ball of krill that's down beneath the surface might be 60 or 80 or 100 feet deep. They go down and then come up through this krill and literally kind of force it up towards the surface and trap the krill against the surface and lunge right up through it with their mouth open. And you can see the whales coming up to the surface. So you can be pretty close to that action. The flip side is all these marine mammals are protected by federal law, and part of that protection is that we're really not supposed to be encroaching that closely on them. So if you're out there in a boat and the whale suddenly lunges up next to your boat to grab a meal, that's on the whale. But if you see whales feeding and you go putting over there in your boat, you're really not supposed to be doing that. And so when I see those pictures, I always think, wow, that looks really cool. But then the second thought I have is, they really shouldn't be that close.
Right. You bring up a good point there. You talk about the federal protection of these animals.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just quickly jump on this. One point is, are sharks, great white sharks, are they protected?
Yeah. Great white sharks in just about all areas of their range, and the big populations of great white sharks. They're found worldwide, but when I think of the hot spots, it's South Australia, the central coast of California here, and South Australia. In each of those areas, there are state and federal protections for those for great white sharks, and then they also are protected under the CITES Treaty, which is an international treaty that regulates shipping of animal products internationally. So great white sharks have, at least in those hot spots, have a pretty good level of protection.
Okay, well, don't forget about that. We'll get back to that later. But
mm-hmm.
Did you finish your question for Gary? Answering the question?
Actually, he had one more question.
Okay.
Gary asked, "Is there a population of whales in the Gulf of Mexico?"
There is. I believe the right whale, the Atlantic right whale. That is, and we're very concerned about their numbers. Their numbers are very, very low, and I think their wintering area takes them. I know definitely down around Cuba, possibly into the Gulf.
Okay, interesting. All right, that's all the questions I got from the chat so far.
Okay, good questions, everybody. Okay. Well, first of all, let me do a follow-up question on Billy Green's question. When they were doing the filming of Star Trek there at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, did you happen to meet Spock?
And that was before I came to work at the aquarium. They did that filming just the first year they were open. And but kind of a fun, quick story about that. One of our members of the staff here at the aquarium years earlier had lived in Southern California and had known Leonard Nimoy very well.
Wow.
And when he was just getting started in acting. And then she moved up here and had been working at the aquarium since before the aquarium opened. She hadn't talked to Leonard Nimoy in many, many years. They just kind of lost track of each other. And when the Star Trek crew came up here to do that filming, they walked into the reception area, and Dina was sitting there, and so it was kind of a reunion. And so I didn't get to meet Spock, but he did come across a couple of old friends here at the aquarium.
Wow, that's a pretty good fact I didn't even know about, and I'm a Star Trek fan too, so I had no idea they did work on it there at the aquarium.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to try to segue a little bit here by bringing up this question, because you and I talked about this before, too. And for anybody who follows great whites and whales, this was a very, very cool story that came about because of a tourist with a video camera. It was basically a killer whale taking out a great white shark, and it was videoed. I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Yeah. And this happened. It was that was a few years back now, but off the Farallon Islands, which is a real gathering point for great white sharks. Usually for the large adult great whites that live here in Northern California. A real hot spot for them is the Farallon Islands, and they gather there every year in September and October in particular to feed on sea lions and elephant seals that are also gathering around the Farallons this time of the year. And so a group from the Oceanic Society was out on a field trip out of San Francisco to look at whales, and the Farallon Islands are also a real hot spot for whales as well, and they had so they were watching these orca, and there was a calf with this group of orca. And one of the large white sharks that's found often there around the Farallons. And I don't know if the shark even really expressed much interest in this calf, but apparently, at least that's the speculation, the orca must have felt somehow that calf was threatened, because they went directly after this white shark. And a white shark is a big animal, but not nearly as big as an adult orca. And the orca killed the white shark right off the bat. And most of the rest of the white sharks disappeared for quite a spell. And that had never been observed before. You know, orca and white sharks are really don't interact with each other very much, and that was really kind of a first.
Yeah, and I remember, I don't know if the show I seen was a follow-up to this whole situation, but I know they had talked about the fact that this killer whale may have been part of a pod that they had actually taught themselves how to effectively kill a great white shark by, the tonic immobility, by flipping the great white on its stomach or its back.
Yeah, because nobody had ever observed this really before, it was, I think people were kind of struck by how effective the orca was at taking on what's also a pretty powerful predator and killing it straight away. And a couple things that I recall from the description was that they seemed to really grab the shark and flip it upside down, which is, for almost all sharks, that really renders them far less effective. And also biting around the gills, which is that's a very vulnerable place for sharks. So that led to some speculation. Wow, have they done this before? They seem to have kind of an idea of what they were doing. And
anytime you're ready, Melissa, I've got a couple more questions in the chat.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Gary Brown had another question. He first a comment. He said that he saw, I guess, on TV this morning that a woman caught a 10,027-pound great white.
A what?
A 10,027-pound is what he says. Great white. And he claims they dissected it on TV this morning.
A 10,000-pound great white?
That's what he's got on here, unless he put one too many zeros. He says the liver is used for buoyancy. It was huge. Does he know anything about that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And 10,000 would be, that's about twice the maximum size that we know of for a white shark. That would have to be huge.
That'd be enormous.
A really big white shark is maybe 3,800 to maybe 4,000 pounds. And
okay, he corrected it. Said 1,027.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's a very respectable white shark at that weight. And the liver, that's absolutely true. Sharks, if you look at fishes, bony fishes, like a lot of the ones we're used to eating, have kind of a balloon inside called a swim bladder, and they can actually inflate or deflate that balloon to regulate their buoyancy. Sharks don't have a swim bladder, so instead they have this huge liver that about 20% of the overall mass of a shark is the liver. So if you had a 1,000-pound shark, could be well over 200 pounds of that animal is just liver.
Wow.
And they store a lot of oil in that liver, shark liver oil, squalene, and if you think about putting oil in water, oil is lighter than water, so sharks regulate their buoyancy by either adding oil to that liver or removing oil from the liver, and that can make them lighter or heavier. And of course, in the days before we had learned to synthesize vitamin A, there was a pretty lively trade in killing large sharks just to extract the oil from their liver, because it was an important source of vitamin A for us.
Yeah. Wow.
So there was like a big harpoon fishery for basking sharks and other big sharks just to get the liver oil.
Wow. All right, and then the other question that I've gotten, this is the only one I've gotten so far, this comes from Chef. He wants to know, in your opinion, if you can even answer this, he says, in your opinion, what percentage of our world's ocean life is still unknown?
Wow, that's a great question, and and I hate to even hazard a guess, other than I would say, in my opinion, I bet close to half of it or more is still yet to be discovered.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a good number.
Yeah.
You figure that we've only explored the upper few feet of the oceans, and not even that very extensively. Got all the incredible depths of the oceans, and every time we go down into the deep parts of the oceans, we see new animals. And that's really only looking at the big stuff that we can see. If you start sampling all the tiny things down there, then there is so much yet to be described. So I think a lot of what lives in the oceans, and remember 70+% of this planet is ocean. So you could say a lot of the things that live in the ocean, a lot of things that live on this planet are yet to be discovered.
Yep.
Kind of an exciting thing to ponder.
Yes, surely is. It sure is. All right, you still got the floor, Melissa.
Okay. Again, excellent questions, everybody. I'm going to try to segue a little bit more now into the whole shark thing. But first of all, let me just say this to our listeners tonight. What I find interesting that separates the Monterey Bay Aquarium from anybody else out there is the fact that the Monterey Bay Aquarium has a successful program where they actually are able to take injured great white sharks that have been caught in bycatch nets by fishermen, and they can actually bring them back to the aquarium where they can nurse them back to health, tag them, and then release them. Which, when I first found out about this, I must have giggled for an hour, because up until the Monterey Bay Aquarium started to do this and they had figured this out, no great white had ever been kept in captivity for any length of time. The problem being, this is an animal that has to keep moving. So for me personally, to be able to hear about this program that they do there with the great white it's really an honor. It's a privilege that we can get such an inside look at the program. So having said that and giving people some background about this, what's going on with the program there with the great whites? Have you had any come in recently this year? How about releases or anything like that? What's going on with that program?
Yeah, and we have our field team once again deployed down in Southern California. Wow. This is really based out of down in Santa Monica Bay in Southern California, where juvenile white sharks, and remember, a white shark pup can be 5 feet long, so they're already pretty good size when they're born. And so we see these animals that are maybe just 1 to 2 years old gathering in this area, and we heard about it originally through fishermen that were accidentally picking up these young white sharks in their nets down there. So we, several years ago, started putting a big 4 million gallon floating net pen in place out there, and working with the local fishers. If you catch a white shark, bring it over to the net, and we'll put it in this big net pen and observe it for a while. And most of those sharks are tagged and then released, and they're part of our tagging program, studying what sharks do out in the ocean. But on several occasions, 6 occasions, we've had animals in that net that really looked pretty robust. They actually looked in pretty good shape. And one of the things we do is we offer them food in that net, because that's been one of the big stumbling blocks in attempts to keep white sharks in the past. Aquariums have had a lot of difficulty getting the animals to eat. So before we would even think of bringing an animal up here, we'll offer it food in that net pen and see if it will eat. And if it establishes a good eating pattern in the net pen, then it becomes a candidate to come up here to the aquarium.
Why do you think they have trouble eating? Is it the stress of being caught in the net, or?
You know, we don't know if it's stress or if it's, it could be the kind of food they're offered. Some of them are kind of picky eaters. We're actually finding that the sharks are fairly complex animals, and the kinds of stimuli that they respond to and what it takes to get them to eat is a little bit different for each animal. But one thing we do know is that while sharks are kind of rugged in some ways, you see sharks that obviously have been in tussles, and they've got scars, and it looks like they've been in fights and get chewed up a little bit, and you'd think they're pretty tough animals. But the flip side of that is they seem to be very sensitive to maybe oxygen deprivation, and if they aren't moving, if their blood is not well oxygenated, it seems like they some of the real sensitive functions in their brain may be affected by that. And one of those might be finding food and eating it. So that's one of the things we look for. You can take an animal, it might look kind of banged up, and it'll be fine. But if it hasn't been moving, and if it hasn't had a good oxygen supply, it can look perfect and still not really be a good candidate to keep in the aquarium.
So what would be the largest shark that you guys have been able to keep at the aquarium?
Well, in terms of great white sharks, I think we had one grow to about 6'2", and we've had larger sharks than that. We have almost continuously kept 7-gill sharks here at the aquarium, and we've had some of those to almost 10 feet. With white sharks, we have, because we found white sharks tend to be pretty feisty, and you want them. I mean, that means they're really healthy, vigorous animals. That's good. It makes it a challenge to handle them, and so we kind of set at 6 to 6.5 foot range as the largest shark that we're willing to handle, and where we can be confident that it's safe for the shark and safe for us to handle. So that means that an animal coming up here needs to be probably under 6 feet, and it also means, because they grow pretty rapidly while they're here with us, that eventually, if everything else is going well, that they will outgrow the exhibit. They'll start to reach that upper limit that we're willing to handle. And at that point, we think, okay, this shark is growing fast enough. We need to figure out, fairly soon how and where we're going to release it.
Right. So for those of you that were watching the program this year, for the whole week of Shark Week, some of you might have figured out that one of the scientists from the Monterey Bay Aquarium, his name is Sal, was actually a part of this part of a program this year, and where they called it the Shark Highway. I've heard it called something else by another scientist, but he was out talking about his stuff on another program, and I've never heard from him since. So, but why don't you talk to us a little bit about Sal's work and what you can tell us about this quote unquote Shark Highway?
Yeah, the tagging that we've been doing now with white sharks, and we've tagged I think about 18 juveniles and over 165 adult white sharks, the adults being tagged here in Northern California, has really helped us get more data on where they go, because there are times of the year when we see white sharks pretty regularly and other times when they just seem to vanish, and that was a big mystery for quite a while. And through the tagging work that Sal Jorgensen has been doing along with Dr. Barbara Block with Stanford University, they have kind of put together this picture now that a lot of our large adult white sharks here along the central California coast head offshore during the winter time. Usually right around the first of the year, they seem to head offshore and south. And some of them go all the way to the Hawaiian Islands. Most of them go to just this area between San Diego and Honolulu, where it's a large patch of the Pacific where they seem to mill around, and that's come to be known as the Shark Cafe out there. And the route they take back and forth is pretty predictable. It's like there's a path back and forth, and that has kind of led Sal to describe it as the Shark Highway or the Great White Highway. And then usually about midsummer, those sharks all start to head back towards the shore again, and we start to again have sightings along the California coast here in July and August. So it's at first it was just a few sharks that we saw doing that from a few tag reports, but with more and more tags and more data, it's a pretty predictable phenomenon that it seems like a large portion of the population has that offshore-onshore migratory path.
Well, now, is this tagged great whites above 10 feet that are doing this? Because you and I had talked before, and pretty much I think that everybody just kind of goes with the idea that 10 foot and under, they're probably still juveniles, or up to 10 feet, they're still considered juveniles. So is it the larger ones above 10 feet that are making this offshore trip, or is it?
Yeah, it's the larger ones, and indeed, right around that 9 or 10 foot range, we consider above that they're probably young adults, and they move up here into cooler water, temperate waters here along the California coast, and also their diet starts to shift away from fish and more towards marine mammals. And those are, so that kind of 10 feet and larger, those adult animals are the ones that seem to engage in this onshore-offshore migration. For the juveniles that we've tagged down in Southern California, they seem to stay in warmer waters, and they seem to move up and down along the coast. So those tag returns show animals that are moving from Southern California down along the Baja coast, sometimes into perhaps the Sea of Cortez, and sometimes farther on down the west coast of mainland Mexico. We've tracked one at least as far as Mazatlan. So different paths for them.
Yeah. So as far as the animals that are going out to the area that's being called the cafe, have the researchers been able to identify something specific, like a food source or something that they could be going out there for, or is it? Do they have any idea? Do they have any clues as to what could be going on?
That is, we have clues, but we're not sure what they add up to yet. Again, from the tag data, these sharks are doing a lot of what we call bounce diving out there, where they'll be at the surface, and then they'll dive down maybe 600 to 800 feet or more, and then come back to the surface, and they're bouncing up and down many times a day. Huh. And we don't know quite why. The other thing we know is an animal that size probably needs to eat pretty regularly, and so if they're out there for several months at a time, they must be finding some food. Maybe that bounce diving is connected with feeding, so there's been some speculation maybe there's a population of squids out there in deeper water that they're feeding on, or some other deeper water fish that they're able to feed on. And so that's one thought. There's also some thoughts that when they are out there, is that where some of the courtship and mating goes on, and is that bounce diving related in any way to courtship? And at least we know where they're going. It's still a huge area of the Pacific encompassed by this cafe, but at least we have a place to start looking for what's going on out there in that part of the Pacific during the winter months, and is there anything that might give us more clues into understanding that shark behavior?
Well, one thing I found pretty interesting was the fact that some of the sharks that have been tagged through a program called TOPS, I believe, are actually showing up over in Hawaii.
Yes.
I mean, that is a really long swim, I would say, for probably any animal.
That's it's a long haul back and forth, and there have also been tag sharks that have swum from South Africa to Australia and back. So these white sharks, while there are hot spots where we definitely know they seem to congregate during certain times of the year, we also know that the white sharks are spotted worldwide, and that we're starting to suspect that they may cover a lot greater distances out there in the open ocean than we ever imagined.
Well, do you think it's because of numbers of sharks and competing territories? I mean, do sharks have territories like land animals do?
And some sharks may be territorial. In terms of the great whites, when they are all gathered together, there are some animals that seem to be locally dominant. I'm the baddest guy around. You don't want to be within, several hundred yards of me. But that's not really a lot of territoriality. It's just that, again, it's more of a dominance hierarchy. So we're not quite sure what would drive that. Why would one shark leave to go to another area? It's not like they're being kicked out of another shark's territory necessarily.
So, I mean, when we talk about the habits and movements and stuff about animals in the ocean, they're actually pretty different from animals on land.
It may well be, and of course the nice part about land is we can set up in a nice high point and we can watch the migrations of animals, and here's the watering hole and this is where they feed, and you can see this is the path they take back and forth, and that's the whole idea of this tagging project for animals out in the ocean. Is basically what are the ocean equivalents of watering holes, feeding areas, resting areas, migratory paths, and because we can't observe it the same way out in the ocean, so it's much more challenging and difficult. But some of the new technology is really helping us start to get some insights into that.
And speaking of technology, why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners about the TOPS program and also that new app that you were telling us about.
Yeah, there's a part of the tagging work in more recent years. For several years, we've been using satellite tags on these animals, and that's a tag that is attached to the animal, and it collects data as the animal moves around the ocean, and it pops loose at some point and downloads the data. In more recent years, we've also been tagging these white sharks with acoustic tags that put out just a little acoustic signal in the water. And then there are more and more listening posts up and down the coast here. So every time a shark swims by one of those acoustic listening posts, it pings the acoustic tag pings a listening post, and it sends us a signal saying, hey, this shark just passed by here. So it's enabling us to kind of monitor movements of some of these sharks literally on a day-to-day basis. And now you can actually join in the scientists with doing that. There's a new app that Dr. Block and Stanford University have put out called SharkNet, and you can download that app and you can literally look at a number of different adult great white sharks that have been studied, some of them for many years, that are carrying these acoustic tags, and you can see, okay, this one just pinged a tag off Santa Cruz 2 or 3 days ago, and a week before that it pinged one of the acoustic posts off the Farallon Islands or off Tomales Bay. So it's kind of fun. You can look up your favorite shark. You can keep track of where they're going up and down the coast here, and so it's allowing us, and it's one of the things I love is when I admire the work these scientists are doing, when we get to kind of look over their shoulders with things like this and actually see some of the data that they're working with. You feel like you're really a lot more close to the whole process of finding out about these animals.
Right. You know, and another thing, too, I don't think I've really talked about before with you, is I noticed on the Monterey Bay Aquarium website, there's actually some tabs that you can open up. And you guys actually have a list. It's like a, I can't remember what it's called, but if you look at, it's a list of the different types of fish out there that are on the market and how they're caught and what is eco-friendly and what sources of fish and how they're caught are not, and how they can actually be harmful to the populations of that specific fish and others that come across them.
Yeah, that's our whole Seafood Watch program, and we've got a whole crew of conservation scientists that are looking at different popular fishes that are popular in markets and restaurants in different parts of the country, and then assessing, is this fish, is it scarce? Are we worried about the numbers, or is it fairly abundant? Is it well managed? Is the process of catching this fish healthy, or does harvesting the fish present any damage, like bycatch or tearing up the seafloor and so on? So they weigh all those different things and then sort these fish into a green list or a yellow list or a red list. And so with the Seafood Watch, we have Seafood Watch cards. There's also a Seafood Watch app that you can download as well. And you can pull that up when you're looking at a menu in a restaurant or looking at fish in the supermarket and say, wow, this one's on the green list. It's a good sustainable fishery. I can eat that and feel good about it. Or it's like, wow, that one's on the red list, and we really need to give those fish a break. I should try and order something different.
Right.
And we've got millions of those Seafood Watch cards out there, and they're really helping to make a difference.
I think I thought that was a really good idea the first time I seen that. Because someone like me, I live in the center of the country. You know what I mean? I'm not real near an ocean. But these types of situations, this is something that's very near and dear to me, and I don't want to help feed the problem. And, speaking of feeding the problem, we don't have much time left, but let's briefly touch on the topic, or as much as you want, of, the whole shark finning issue, because this is something I think people should be thrown in prison for forever.
Yeah, and shark finning is, and if people aren't familiar with it, it's the process of catching sharks, cutting their fins off, and essentially the shark minus fins is thrown back into the ocean.
It's horrific, man.
And it's from just a utilitarian standpoint. If you're gonna catch the shark, at least eat the whole thing. Don't waste it. But beyond that, it's close to 100 million sharks a year, probably, that are killed for in fisheries, and maybe 70 million or more are killed just for the fins. And it's an incredibly wasteful process, and it's putting a huge dent in shark populations, so much so that sharks are pretty greatly reduced in many parts of the oceans now. And so there's been a growing movement, though, to say, this doesn't make sense. And I'm happy to say this past year that the state of California outlawed not only finning sharks, which has been outlawed for a while here in state waters, but also has outlawed the possession of shark fins. So over the next year or so, because there are markets that have shark fins now that in their inventory, so they have a year to sell those off and to use them up, and then importing shark fins, selling them in this state will be illegal after that. And there are several other states that have followed suit. And who knows, at some point there may be, even on a national level, be a ban. And there are a few other countries also that are jumping on that bandwagon. So bit by bit, we're trying to really get away from that incredibly wasteful process of finning. And
yeah, was it last year? Gordon Ramsay, he's a internationally known chef, actually did a program about shark finning, and he actually went to Japan, and he actually had the nerve, which is not shocking, to actually approach these people who were taking part in this, and he'd show these huge racks of the fins hanging out on people's, roofs of their homes, just drying out. And he talked about how, basically there is no taste to this. A shark fin, he says, is basically tasteless. It's like gelatin.
Yeah, it's largely the texture that it lends to shark fin soup. That's the big attraction.
Exactly. So basically they're killing off a species, an entire species, for something that really you could get the same thing if you just went to the store and bought a box of gelatin. Yeah. And it, there's some in some cultures it's a very fashionable thing to have shark fin soup, but I think sharks ought to be fashionable also. It's like, unfortunately, humankind has a long. There's a lot of stories about where we have wiped out animals, whether it's killing birds for feathers to wear in our hats or things like that. That really is not necessary. And I'm hoping that at some point we'll be talking about shark finning as a practice in the past that we moved away from. Oh, God, I hope so, too. Just to me, it's just one of the most destructive things I've ever heard about. I mean, we talk so much in life about the animals that are on land. And I'm all for saving the tigers and the lions and all these other predatory animals because it's part of an ecosystem. It's part of a balance of nature. You have to have large predatory animals in order to keep things in check.
Yeah.
And the ocean is absolutely no different. We have to have this to keep our oceans healthy. And without a healthy ocean, we don't have a healthy planet.
Absolutely. And, the sharks are helping maintain healthy fish populations that feed millions and millions of people also. We need sharks. If your interest in the ocean is just to continue to provide food, that is absolutely important, sharks play a key role in that also. Maybe if we hope to have other fish to eat in the future, we shouldn't be eating so many sharks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Think
about it. Hey, Melissa, we got a few more questions here.
Oh, okay.
Chef had asked a question earlier. He wanted to know, do you think that water quality requirements such as oxygen levels, high nitrates, etc., may be a reason why great whites don't survive in captivity?
Yeah, because the few places where they've been kept in captivity have been aquariums that pay a lot of attention to their water quality. So I'm not sure that really enters into it. I think it's more a function of the health of the animal, and if the animal is eating and how it's handled and so on, has a more direct impact on the success as an animal in an aquarium.
Okay. And then Gary Brown wants to know, do all sharks have the rotation of teeth or just the great white?
Well, most sharks constantly lose and replace teeth. Now, there's some sharks that have very little in the way of teeth, and so that doesn't happen nearly as much. But certainly for most of the big toothy sharks that you think of when you think of sharks, like white sharks and tiger sharks and all those others, they are constantly losing teeth, and they have many sets of replacement teeth just ready to kind of roll up into place. So
right.
For most of those big sharks, you're never going to see an old toothless shark gumming its food out there.
And I've got to get this one in because Tyler Meyer sent this one, and we think you'll have a sense of humor with this one, Jim. So I'm going to get this one out there. He goes, SeaWorld had a couple great whites in captivity in Jaws 3D.
Oh.
He goes, they didn't have any trouble getting them to eat because they ate a lot of the tourists. So he says, I realize it's a fictional story, but have you tried this approach with aquarium patrons?
Wait a minute, feeding the tourists to the shark?
Somehow that seems like it'd be bad for business.
And you might get
and to be
locked
honest,
up.
When you look at the typical person, I think we'd probably be considered junk food for sharks.
I figured I'd get that one in since we're down to the last 10 seconds.
Yep. God, there's so much I could say right now about that last question. God bless you for asking it. Well, once again, we've gone another year and finally had another chat about sharks, and the hour just absolutely flew by. So, but I wanted to thank you, Mr. Covel, for agreeing to come on the program and sharing what knowledge you have about what your scientists are doing and hopefully what you guys are going to find out. So thank you.
Yeah, keep your fingers crossed, and we'll have more to report next year.
Well, that's great. And I'm going to really badger you about bringing on one of your scientists with you next year.
Yeah.
It's not an either-or thing. But you make sure you tell whoever's going to do it that they better be on their game.
Okay.
Because I will be studying.
That sounds good.
All right. All right, Billy.
Well, we thank you, Jim, for being on the show. We really enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Melissa, for doing most of the hosting, so I could sit back and actually enjoy it better.
Not a problem at all. I mean, I really do look forward to the show I do with Jim once a year. It's fantastic because we have to have things that we enjoy outside of what we do as a role.
Yeah.
So, and we have to care about other animals that we know about. Let's care more about those too.
Yeah.
That's personally how I feel.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Jim. And we will sign off the show. Thanks, everyone, for listening and everyone that participated in chat. We greatly appreciate it. Good night, everybody.
And thank you, Billy, for hosting it.
You're welcome. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
All right.
You're listening to Sasquatch Watch Radio on the Blog Talk Radio Network. Thanks to everyone listening to the show tonight. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate everyone in the chat rooms, and we appreciate anyone who calls in and listens live to the show. Again, you've just finished listening to an episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio, Special Edition. We will do this occasionally, so keep on the watch. You will see announcements on Facebook. You will see announcements in emails whenever we do another special edition show. So thanks again for everyone for listening, and have a great and wonderful time out in the woods squatching. Good night, everyone. Keep up with the news that Sasquatch Watch of Virginia is doing, feel free to look at our website at www.sasquatchwatch.org. Good night.
Hey, Northern Shenandoah Valley commuters. Traffic got you stressed? Tired of watching vehicles in the HOV lane go whizzing by? Gas prices got you fuming? No pun intended. RideSmart has solutions. Proven solutions that are currently helping your friends, neighbors, and coworkers slash fuel and maintenance costs and get to work faster with less hassle. Carpools, van pools, public transit, biking, and more. You can learn how to ride smarter today by exploring all your options at ridesmartva.org. Ridesmartva.org. Save money, save time, save the planet, and less stress.
Try Cora's cult favorite period products without joining a cult. Cora offers modern period products like whisper-thin pads and liners with a breathable cotton top sheet and tampons made with 100% organic cotton. And with a full range of absorbencies, Cora's got you covered from heavy flow to barely there days. Try Cora today for a more comfortable period, clean and simple. Find Cora nationwide at Target, CVS, and online at cora.life.